Expert Talk. There's a recording sound. So, hello everyone. I'm Daniel with UBC Psych External, and I'll be your host for today's event. Before we continue, however, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We may not be physically on campus, but UBC Psych operates on UBC's infrastructure, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. Today's event is the UBC Psych Expert Talk. Psych is one of the largest international honor societies in the world with the purpose of providing academic and professional development opportunities to students. In service of this goal, we here at the UBC chapter of Psych have developed the Expert Talk series, a bi-weekly event where we invite professionals in the field of psychology to share their experiences, advice, and knowledge with UBC students. Today's talk will feature Dr. Lauren Serpico, who received her PhD in psychology from Capella University in 2020. Dr. Serpico's doctoral research focused on the relationship between personality, social media integration, and mindfulness. Her passion for the intersection between psychology and social media has led to her current work as a social media strategist and digital community builder. Dr. Serpico is a passionate advocate for mental well-being and mindfulness in the context of an attention economy. Today, she will be speaking on the future of ethics in social media use. If at any time during the talk you have questions you would like answered, please type them into the Zoom chat and we will get to them during the Q&A section of the event. Without further ado, I am very excited to hand it over to our awesome speaker for today, Dr. Lauren Serpico.
Thanks, Daniel, and thank you guys for having me. I'm going to share my screen and start my presentation with Canva. Big Canva fan. I don't know about you guys. So like Daniel introduced, I just recently defended my dissertation in talking about personality, social media, and mindfulness. But rather than talking a little bit about the research itself today, I want to talk more about my path and my why in the hopes that it could help to inspire your own. So some of the things that we'll talk about today include social media and psychology and what my journey on this path has been, social media and mindfulness, and if these two could ever coexist, and if so, how, digital ethics and how your attention is valuable in today's society, and then like Daniel mentioned, the Q&A when we'll have an opportunity to hear from you. So a little bit about my personal journey. So this photo on the side is from 2003. This is me with my desktop computer. My little sister, she was 3 at the time. So I was born in the early 90s and I really grew up on the cusp of digital development. I remember my first computer being installed in the den. I remember the internet coming in and you couldn't use the microwave and the internet at the same time or else you would get kicked off. So with my sister being born in 2000, I really kind of can conceptualize the change that happened in kind of the decade in between millennials and Gen Z, which I feel really kind of helped shape my path in being this liaison between the two generations and speaking about this topic. But I'll rewind a little bit before I get to where I am today. So in high school, if you were to ask me what I was most passionate about, I would tell you digital journalism. I really loved learning about people, documentaries, hearing their stories, but social media really wasn't the force that it is today. I was very active on MySpace. I was the person that people would give their passwords to do cool backgrounds. Then we graduated to Facebook, where that's where kind of social media began to boom a little bit more. But when I was graduating high school, it wasn't like you can go into a field of social media or focus solely on social media. And there's always those naysayers, right? There's always those people who will tell you that's not a field you'll be successful in. That's not somewhere that you could go or make money. And I'll get to this a little bit later, but there will always be naysayers and no one is following your path and knows your path better than you. But my love of social won over my love of media. If I were to study digital journalism, I would have been on more of a path to focus more on this media aspect of it, where my heart really belonged in the social, in the storytelling, and learning about people and their stories and why we behave the way that they do. So that really set the scene for me to begin to study psychology. Although I wasn't really sure where it would take me, I knew that that's where I was kind of getting pulled and called to go. So within this, I saw that some of you guys sent Daniel some questions, so I tried to incorporate some of them within the presentation. So one of you asked, how did you get into your career? Were there any experiences in your undergraduate which helped you get your first job? And I'll give you a little bit teaser, but Craigslist helped my path in a unique way. So as I was an undergraduate, I really had this preconceived notion that psychology and therapy went hand in hand. If you were to study psychology, you were going to become a clinician or a therapist of some sort. So you go through your introductory courses as a psychology major, you learn the basics. And at the time, I also was doing my work study program at an elementary school. I was working in a kindergarten classroom. I was teaching dance. I loved working with children. Again, my sister is almost 9 years younger than me. This is really where I was comfortable. This is where I felt that my path was going to be, child psychology. I actually graduated with my bachelor's in 3 years because of transfer credits I had and intersession classes. And my school, I went to Sacred Heart University for my undergrad and grad school. That's in Connecticut. They offered a 1-year master's program in applied psychology. And there were 2 different concentrations you can choose. You could choose community or you can choose industrial organizational, so more of the business side. So my plan, again, still around like 20, 21 years old at the time. So still not having a really full view of what I wanted to do, thinking more along this path of child psychology was that I'm going to stay at Sacred Heart for the 4 years so I can graduate with my friends. I'll do my 3-year undergrad and I'll stay for the extra year for grad school. I'll use this master's rather in community psychology to help leverage me to get accepted to a PsyD program. Well, that'll help shave off some coursework and keep moving forward into this world of psychology or child psychology. And that's kind of that go, go, go mindset that we're conditioned to have. And that's kind of when you're listening to the naysayers or to what the stigma is or the things that you think that you should be doing, but kind of forgetting about your passion or your flame. So this kind of goes back into how I got into my career. And once again, Craigslist. So I applied to that PsyD program for child psychology and I got in. This was at the very beginning of my master's program. But now I'm thinking, how the heck am I going to move out? The program, I lived in Connecticut. How am I going to move to San Diego, which is where the program was, not have a job? I don't have money. What am I doing? So I decided to turn to Craigslist and see if there were any gigs or jobs or internships and just kind of figure out my life via Craigslist. And I found an ad that said paid internship, remote social media strategist. And I thought, interesting. I've always loved social media. This was my original kind of passion and what ignited my flame and what I loved learning about. And it was always kind of deep down there. When I was sitting in my psychology classes, I loved learning about social psychology and the ways that we can influence the masses through our words and our messages. So I applied and I thought, what's the worst that could happen? This isn't legitimate. This isn't real. There's no harm in introducing myself and sending a message and seeing where it goes. So I did, and they responded, and it was legitimate. And this was my foot into the door in the field of social media psychology. So everyone else at the end of that master's program gave their capstone presentation on some type of clinical field, whether it was nursing and psychology or child psychology. And I was the only one who stood up there. And I gave my presentation on the community of digital social networks. And that's where my research really began. And my professor said, you know what, this is what it's all about. This is thinking creatively and using psychology in a field that people might not necessarily think about or might not connect automatically. So that's how it began. And that's what kind of led into that job, because that internship turned into a job outside of college where I was able to learn more and more about the field of psychology. I was able to understand a little bit more about this research world in psychology. So this was in 2013. So for context, Instagram and Snapchat were about 1 year old. So things were moving pretty quickly, but the major kind of shift that was happening in the social media world with apps like this is that originally when you were using social media, you were more or less kind of tied to your computer and you were sitting down and doing this. But with Snapchat and Instagram, we began kind of going to our phones. So my original research and what I was interested in was how we can use social media to change the stigma of mental health. And I was like, oh, imagine if there was a blog that talked about mental health. And now fast forward, there's so many Instagram accounts and there's so many different platforms where people are able to share their experiences and for people to know that they're not alone. So I feel like that foresight was really exciting. And that's what kind of helped me solidify that I wanted to take this research route and I wanted to continue studying the psychology of social media. So, social media and psychology. One of you asked if my path would have been different had I studied something else like creative writing or something more in line with media. And what I love about social media and psychology and the way that I feel that they're kind of tied as far as social science is that you're really using both part of your brain. You're thinking creatively and analytically at the same time, thinking about how to present information to make things look nice and grab people's attention and have conversations with them and measure what works and doesn't work. So that's that scientific component of it and how it can help make people's life better. And why I'm so passionate about talking to our next generation, so you guys, about this path is what science was explained to me by one of my favorite professors. Science is a way to solve a problem. And the best way to solve this problem or any problem is really knowing the right questions to ask. It's not necessarily all about the answers. We have to think about the questions that we're asking. So I believe that the generation who is growing up with social media, who uses it, who kind of lives and breathes it, are the ones that understand it the best and are the ones that are going to be able to ask the most accurate questions. So we need more young scientists in the field who are able to ask these questions and feel as passionate about learning and how we can improve this field to make everyone's life a little bit better, because social media is going to keep going as it is. As we kind of mentioned in the introduction, we're in this attention economy. I'm sure many of us have seen The Social Dilemma. There's so many negatives. And I don't think that's everyone's priority. I do think there's good out there, and I do think there are people who are fighting the noble fight. And that's why I am excited to kind of continue sharing my message with you. So again, this is a world where creativity really meets science. And for you guys who you might not be studying psychology and social media, that's not even necessarily a field that is widely available where you could just pick from your syllabus list and say, hey, this is what I want to study. But if you can find creative ways to pair what you know intrinsically as a user of social media with your education, that's what's going to make you a leader in your field. And that's what gives you the authority to speak about these things in a way where you can inspire others. So somebody asks, how can I apply my psychology degree to build a career in online media? So again, this isn't something that can just happen overnight, and it's not always a job that you could apply for. But my advice is always the best way to start something is just to start, whether it's a passion project or maybe a project that you're working on for school. But I have always looked at my social media accounts as my digital portfolio. I felt like there was no stress in being able to try out different things, to communicate differently, to display things in Canva or videos or YouTube or all these different formats, because there was no stress, because this wasn't a deliverable for work. This is what I was doing for me, and this is how I was building my portfolio. So then when I was approaching different companies or internships or jobs, I could say, hey, this is how I do things, or this is what I've done. So a piece of advice I would give on this end would be to kind of think creatively and kind of begin a passion project as you're building your portfolio. Because this is, again, the difference is if I would have studied art, a degree like that might help you create this portfolio within your context of your school. But if you're doing this on your own, if you're just kind of studying general psychology and you want to find a way to make social media fit in it, you have to think creatively and take this initiative to think outside of the box and find a way where it's, again, going to keep your fire burning and something that you're going to be excited to do. And it's not necessarily something that you have to do. It's something that you want to do to kind of continue moving forward in this field. So the next topic I want to bring up, and something that I researched, is social media and mindfulness. And like I mentioned before, I think this major shift happened when we went from visiting social media on our computer, so having to physically sit down and be in front of our computer to type in www.myspace.com or whatever it may be, versus when now things are just connected to our phones or our watches. And it's really hard to kind of quantify how much time we're spending thinking about it or using these apps or doing these things, because it's connected to us. It's who we are. It's kind of who we've become. It's getting darker out. So I have written here, to improve our relationship with technology, we must improve our relationships with ourselves. And I thought that deserved a mic drop, because I think it's pretty profound in the sense that we can't control what's going on around us at all times. Things are going to continue progressing. They're already progressing exponentially, where we really don't know what is coming next. But what we do have autonomy over is ourselves, our own personal behaviors, our triggers, what makes us tick, what we enjoy doing, what we don't enjoy doing. And the more self-awareness we have, and the more time we spend being mindful and really just enjoying that time with ourselves and learning things about ourselves, the more that we can recognize when we typically go reach for our phone, or when we click Instagram, or when we find ourselves scrolling, and why. So the more we kind of learn about ourselves and the more mindful we are outside of the context of anything else, the more we'll be able to bring those practices into our technological lives. So one of you asked, what practices help you maintain a healthy relationship with social media? So 2 tricks that I like to suggest. One of them is finding a cue. So our feeds are curated, obviously, to the things that we're interested in. So think about something that you typically see in your feed. So maybe it's puppies, maybe it's workouts, maybe it's recipes, whatever is something that you see consistently. Use that as your cue. And when you see that in your feed, take that as an opportunity to just pause and think about why you opened the app, what you did before that, what brought you here. And the more you kind of condition yourself to do that, the more realization and more mindful you'll be of how and why you're using these apps. Because I don't think that social media is a bad thing. I don't think that just quitting something cold turkey is realistic, but I think the more aware we are in how we're doing this, the more we can kind of overcome this information economy and attention economy where so much is being thrown at us. And if we're just consuming it mindlessly, then the messaging is going to kind of work and persuade us to do things that we might not necessarily do, or buy things that we might not necessarily want. But the more mindful we can become, the more informed decisions that we can make for ourselves. Second thing I like to suggest is keeping a journal or a notebook or even a note in your phone. And at the end of the day, write down something that you've learned from social media, because this will make you a more active consumer of knowledge as you're scrolling, because you'll be thinking, oh, what is going to be the cool thing that I learned today? And then at the end of the week, you learned 7 new things. At the end of the month, you learned 31 new things. And it's a cool way to kind of consume your knowledge in a more mindful way. So digital ethics, I also want to address that I'm really upset that they took The Office off of Netflix, but I want to bring up the point of staying ethical in an attention economy. So if you're working in the field of social media, your goal is ultimately to catch people's attention. So how do we do this in an ethical way? So for example, you guys, as part of Psych and having your Psych account, you put your information out there because you want people to see it. So this is your ethical mission of you want your post to draw attention because your mission and your values are noble. So the questions that I ask are, what is your why? What do you want to communicate on your channels? For me, I like to spread information on psychology and mindfulness and continue sharing this message. If you're going to work for a company or intern for a company and your role is going to be in the social media world, what is the company's values? And are these aligned with your own? And sometimes the ones that are a little bit unethical are probably the ones that will pay more. But that's frustrating. You think of like the giants like Instagram or Facebook, and you see the things like the social dilemma and the trouble that can occur when data isn't handled properly. So you have to kind of make that ethical decision of what your journey is going to be, what your why is, and how you're using these platforms and inspiring others to use these platforms as well. Somebody asked, would you say that you're fulfilled with your current career, or are you looking to move in a different direction? So I didn't speak very much about what I actually do. So as we mentioned before, I work in community development. I work for an app called Awaves, and it's a holistic day planning app. And I found this as I was on my journey of doing research on social media and mindfulness. And I felt so aligned with this company's values because it's actually an app that's teaching you how to use your time. So prioritizing how to put social media in your day, or more importantly, how to put things in your day that make you happy, whether it's dancing or painting or reading, because then you're thinking a lot less about, oh, I have to spend less time on social media. Kind of just happens naturally because you're spending more time doing other things. Through this company, I'm also affiliated with Scripps Research Institute in San Diego, where I teach students about health research and health science. So I definitely feel very fulfilled on the front of my career. But I do have a very entrepreneurial spirit. So I always feel kind of most fulfilled and most excited when I'm doing things on my own. I always kind of enjoy juggling different things. I like diversifying my life and my networks. So I also have a personal training company, and I'm a certified personal trainer. I decided to do this because I needed something to balance out my time sitting in front of a computer and helping people in a more physical way work on their confidence and their communication with themselves and feeling happy and healthy in the way that they carry themselves. And also, I moved from New York to San Diego, and I wanted a way that I was going to be able to make friends and to meet people. So diversifying in that way, and also having, my gig that makes me happy and that brings me joy, and also my gig that allows me to get out into the world, because you might feel pressured that your job has to be so well aligned with what you studied in school, or specifically in this niche or in this market. But again, no one knows your path better than you. And whatever brings you to the next level of whatever that next level is for you, you're the one at the end of the day that has to feel fulfilled and happy. And always kind of think back to this question of, do you feel fulfilled? So I think this is a good question to always kind of carry with you. And I know it's one that I'm going to carry with me as well as I kind of continue progressing in my field. So to kind of wrap this up, here are 4 things that I wish that somebody told me 10 years ago. So again, this kind of resounding message of no one knows your path better than you. Maybe there could be a counselor that you might hire to help you in a job search, and that's someone whose advice that you might take a little bit more critically in helping you on this path. But don't let the naysayers be the ones to dictate your path. Ultimately, you're the one in the driver's seat. You have to listen to your gut, and you have to make these well-informed decisions and get input from the people who love you and the people who care about you. But at the end of the day, your path is your own. Second, working for free could lead to so much greater value. Internships are a great way to learn new things about a field that might not be directly connected to what you're doing, but if you can find ways to add value to a company or to volunteer, this is a great way to help build up your portfolio or your resume. So I'll give you an example of this. Years ago, when I was trying to build up my social media portfolio, I answered an ad in New York for the Williamsburg Film Festival. And it was an unpaid gig, but I wanted the experience of being able to be the social media manager for this film festival. So I took the gig and I made so many wonderful connections with different writers, producers, that I was hired by individual people with these new connections that I made to help handle their social media. So essentially, the jobs and the opportunities and the connections that I made from answering one unpaid ad led me to a whole new network of direction. So don't be afraid to do something for free, because sometimes connections and relationships, that social part of social media, are so much more valuable than that initial paycheck could ever be. Third, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. There's no harm in putting yourself out there. So whether you're in your field and you want to ask for a raise, or if you want to ask for more responsibilities, it could be intimidating. It can give you kind of a knot in your stomach sometimes, and that's okay. But if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. And fourth, believe in yourself and you're halfway there. I'll give another example of this. I have this one friend who he's been podcasting for a while. He puts a lot of content out there, and he always says, "Oh, I want to be a digital personality. I want to be a social personality." I said, "You are." Introduce yourself as that. Be that digital personality. Say that you're this content creator, because a stranger doesn't know you. A stranger will see your profile and see all these things that you're putting out there and say, "Oh, wow, he is." So have that confidence in yourself and carry yourself in that way. And other people will feel that and see that and give you those opportunities to really shine. And that's what you have to kind of take and run with. So thank you for listening. I would like to now open it up for you guys. I'm going to put the light on because it got really dark.
Okay, let's give a big round of virtual applause for Dr. Serpico for the incredible presentation. And just as a personal note, I thought your points about mindfulness was really important, because, right now, staying at home, sort of your only exposure to your social circle and the outside world is pretty much through social media exclusively. So really important to keep yourself sort of separate from your online personalities too. With all this in mind, let's move on to the Q&A portion of our event. If you have any questions, please type them out into the Zoom chat. So we have first question here. These were sent in by students before the event. So how has your independent work on your Instagram fitness account at Holy Hit Fit and providing virtual personal training lessons influenced your view on the value of social media? And we also have a plug for you here if you guys want to check it out.
Awesome. So I really put a lot more emphasis into this account when quarantine and COVID started. As I mentioned before, I do personal training, but with everything kind of being shut down, it was hard to train people in person, and I really missed that part of my life. So I turned to social media to put more of this information out there. And what I actually ended up doing through this channel was I was hosting weekly Zoom workouts, and I was doing them donation based, and I ended up raising about $1,200 for a nonprofit called Fueling Frontlines, or Food for the Frontlines. And we raised money for a hospital to fund meals for their staff in New York, in San Diego, and in Austin, Texas. So it was nice to be able to take my passion for social media and putting out content like this, for personal training and bringing my social circles together on a Zoom call, and also dancing and being silly and moving around and raising money for people who really, I feel like I I'm sure a lot of people here could relate in being a psychology major. One of my professors told me no one is a psychology major for no reason. I'm a very empathetic person. And when all of this started, I just felt so emotionally drained and sad because I didn't even know where to start. I didn't know how I could help or what I could do. So kind of staying in tune with my passions and the things that made me happy and pairing that in a way where I could help others and raise money was definitely something that brightened my spirits, and also the people who consistently joined me week after week. So I really do love this account. This one was a really fun one to grow, and I would love to put more emphasis on it. But I've definitely been trying to put more time in growing my own personal account, which is why this one kind of hasn't been updated in a little while. But I like the aesthetic still.
It is a very nice looking account. I think it's really great that social media sort of lowers the barrier for entry for these like philanthropic activities.
Absolutely.
And we have a question from Bella in the chat. We're going to be prioritizing the live questions for the Q&A session. So make sure you type them in if you've got any burning questions you want to ask. So she asks, how do you prevent yourself from seeking validation from social media?
That's a great question. And that's something that's really difficult to do in general as a whole, of how do you prevent yourself from seeking validation from others in general. And it kind of goes back to my original messaging of you really have to know yourself and have that self-awareness and carry yourself in a way that you feel confident. I feel that's something that I kind of come up against, not so much in seeking validation, but something that's hard to overcome or a challenge for me is imposter syndrome, and feeling like, do I really know that much about this subject? Can I really be the one to talk about this? And do I know enough? So not so much seeking validation, but just feeling like, am I good enough to put this out there? And I think once you start questioning that, are you good enough? It goes back to that fourth point that I bring up of believe in yourself and you're halfway there. And the way that you carry yourself and the way that you show yourself. And my overall goal is always to practice what I preach. And I feel like if I can carry myself in that way, and if I can put myself out there in that way, then that can inspire others. So I think that's really what I go back to when I'm having these kind of existential crises of practicing what I preach and really believing in myself and not caring what other people think of me, because those naysayers will always be there. There's always going to be people out there who might not be watching for the right reasons. And that's something I think psychology has taught me as well, is that it's not always about you. It's about what that person is carrying with you, because you put yourself in those shoes and you think about the things that you might be feeling insecure about, you might be thinking about. So kind of taking it from that lens of kind of feeling confident, feeling strong, and really being mindful of the content that you're putting out in the world. And it goes back to that why. Why am I creating this? Why am I putting this out in the world?
Bella says, thank you in the chat.
You're welcome.
And next question is from Christy. She asks, how did you find your aesthetic / style on Canva? Did you find that this made it difficult to curate your Instagram theme?
Fun. So I actually learned, like, as social media and Instagram's kind of progressing, how much I really love the design side of it. That's really nothing I've ever studied or learned. I just really enjoy spending time on Canva. My color aesthetic really comes from sunsets. So those purples and pinks really comes from a picture of a sunset that I took the colors out of.
I really
And
see it.
yeah, when you kind of go back in time on Instagram, even like a year ago, I think we were all, or content creators were much more strict in their feed. So having a pattern of like photo, sunset, plant, whatever it was, and that was much more difficult to curate my Instagram feed, because I felt like I can't post this picture because it's not a sunset, and like that's frustrating and that's not fun anymore. So kind of something that I tried to do throughout this kind of COVID experience was, before bed, I would watch a YouTube video on something that I wanted to learn more about, specifically in the realm of social media marketing, branding, design, again, these things that I didn't necessarily study. And the common theme that I was finding is that more and more of these content creators were just kind of going off their brand colors and the feel rather than having it be so perfect. So moving away from perfectionism as a whole, but presenting yourself in a way where if someone's going to see your feed as their whole, they look and they say, oh, wow, this is a content creator. This is someone who put thought into these posts, not someone who's just kind of posting willy-nilly. And just by sticking to a theme of different colors, you can create on a whim, and you can put different things in there because you like them, and it doesn't have to fall into a certain type of pattern, but just creating that consistency in the feel, as well as consistency in your messaging, which I think is just as important as kind of putting out pictures that look the same, but ones that promote the same message. A really good analogy that I heard once is like, if you go to a pizzeria, you're expecting pizza. And sometimes they might serve spaghetti or, a meatball sandwich, and that's okay because it kind of fits within. But if they're serving Chinese food, that's not what you came there for. So if you're a content creator and you're putting out information about a specific topic, and then you go completely off topic, that's the same type of consistency that's just kind of important as the way that your feed looks and the way that your content looks. It's what people come back for, and that's how a community is really built. They're built more around your messaging than they are around the media.
Really good points, especially useful for me because I'm one of those people who post willy-nilly. So the next question is, what are some trends you have observed over the course of your research regarding young adult social media use and mindfulness?
Good question. So I think this trend of observation occurs in two places: in my specific research and in real life. So in this specific research, this goes back to my original point earlier about young people being in this field so they could ask the right questions. Some things that I was finding in the research that's been done over the past 10 years or so, they're not really asking the right questions. So the research shows that young people are so much less mindful, or young people are using social media in a different way than Gen X. And it's like, yeah, okay, duh. But it's not really getting to the meat of the why. It's not really asking those questions to learn about the ways that we're using social media and the how. So things that I've observed in my natural life and being on social media and seeing what Gen Z is doing, especially on things like TikTok, is that you're able to use these different platforms in such an authentic way and spread messages of mindfulness and positive mental health. So just for instance, you guys in a Psych account, that's why I love finding these different accounts of people talking about psychology and self-love and mental health, is because you're using this platform in a way to amplify messages that previous generations have not been. So I don't necessarily think it's anyone's fault that newer generations have a lower attention span, because it's not our fault what we're born into. This is just kind of the technological times of things are getting quicker. We were talking about this earlier before everyone else came on, and how there's just like this lack of curiosity because you have answers at your fingertips. So that really does change the way that our brains are working. So I would love to see the trends kind of fall more towards the sides of not just posting about mindfulness, but really kind of living it and breathing it, and kind of starting this movement of using social media in a different way. But it's really hard when we're up against these giants like Instagram and TikTok, who they're just trying to suck you in within the first 3 seconds. So the more we can kind of build up our mindfulness and have a larger attention span, like just by reading books, by taking time to just read a physical book, so we don't have to be distracted by our screens, and training our brains to kind of consume more long form content and just like take a step back. That's the trend that I would like to see observed, but it's really hard when we're coming up against this really short attention span that is being fostered by just the networks as a whole.
Definitely. I used to be able to read like a whole book as a kid, and now it's so difficult to get through like just the papers I gotta read for school.
It really is. And I find like I'll set a timer for maybe 10 minutes, and then I'll set a timer for 15 minutes, and like conditioning yourself to get back into those habits, because that's what I love pairing with my personal trainer mind. Always try and find ways to train ourselves, just like we train our brains to exercise or to eat nutritious foods or to sleep right. Training our brains to consider mindfulness as part of our day and our habits is, just as much of a process.
Absolutely. Okay, so our next question here is, we have a question from the chat actually.
Cool.
Tarika asks, how did you decide on pursuing a PhD in psychology? Did you think of working in academia?
Absolutely. I was so inspired by so many of the different professors that I worked with. Especially when you get to the point where you can start taking elective courses in psychology and you could see all the different passions that these different professors had. And it just seemed like every professor I had was doing something else, and mostly in a clinical field, but they all had their own way about them. And I was so inspired by that. And I always thought, like, wow, if I'm sitting in this classroom feeling this way, there's so many other students whose lives they've touched in this way. So I definitely, originally was thinking about working in academia. And then as I continue on in this path and see how many ways that there are to educate and to communicate with students, that don't necessarily mean that you have to be affiliated with a university. Maybe down the road, maybe future Lauren might work in some type of space like that. But right now, I'm really kind of enjoying paving my own way and seeing how I could communicate in a way, again, that entrepreneurial spirit, but learning how I could have that direct line to the students rather than feeling like there's other channels that I have to go through.
Absolutely. And teaching on social media, you've already kind of got a leg up on the professors because they're all pretty much YouTubers and Twitch streamers right now anyways with their education.
Totally.
Right. Sharon says that if you would like to ask your question directly to Lauren Serpico verbally, just raise your hand or indicate it in the chat, and we'll get to you. You can turn on your mic and ask it directly. So the next question is, what sort of grad schools can I apply for if I can't get into a Psych Master's, as they require research experience? And what are some tips on getting into research with an average GPA?
Good questions. So I guess grad schools, I'm not too familiar, so I don't know if I could speak to this too much, but I think finding different niches and different schools, and I think now there's really so many different opportunities for remote learning. So that could be a path that maybe you get some coursework out of the way and you're able to transfer in some credits. So that may be an opportunity. Or if you could reach out maybe to a different lab of a school that you're working with or you want to look towards and see if you can connect with someone, see if there's any opportunities for volunteering or for internship work. And maybe those connections can help you get into a different program or get into a different school. And I think the same goes for getting into research with an average GPA, is just to see how you can make connections, like find someone who's doing something similar to what you want to be doing and talk to them about their path and see if there's anyone that they know that needs help or if they need help. And again, not being afraid to put yourself out there and believing in yourself, because your GPA is just one thing, but your passion is something else. And if this is something that you really want to do, if this is something that you're really passionate about, then that shouldn't be the only thing that stops you. There's this one quote that, like, walls are there to show you how bad you want something. If you find what it is that you really want, you can find these creative ways to make connections and try and put yourself out there to make these things happen. I hope that answers the question.
And hopefully, if this makes you feel better, this is publicly available information. You can see UBC's, the list of acceptance to UBC's medical school. And some applicants have like 3.0 GPAs, 2.7 GPAs, and just have, I guess, a stellar profile outside of that. So GPA isn't everything.
For sure. One of the clients that I train, he is 68 years old, and he just went back to school virtually and just graduated with his bachelor's, and now he's going into a master's program. And it's like, it's so cool seeing his confidence in himself and how excited he is about this, because he's like, why not? What's stopping me from going back and doing this now? So it's really cool to see people no matter what. And he was someone who was always conditioned, oh, I'm not smart. I don't know. My grades aren't good enough. And he actually learned later on in life that he was dyslexic. And being
Oh,
dyslexic really prevented him from succeeding in these different ways. So in going through his own personal journey, it allowed him to kind of regain that confidence and keep moving forward in remote world of learning.
that's awesome. It's never too late to educate yourself.
For sure.
And then next one, this one's a good question. How can I apply my psych degree to build a career in online media?
So this is one that I actually addressed in the presentation, and definitely building up your portfolio, making those connections, finding companies or courses or people that you could help add value to and reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'm a psychology student. I'm interested in filming TikToks, or I'm interested in making Instagram carousels. Can I make you a couple for your account? Or can I do this for you? Or do you know someone you could help? And putting yourself out there, again, not being afraid to work for free, especially right now, a lot of businesses need help. So if this is a way that you could reach out to maybe a small business that you know and love, and you want to help create content for them or doing something along those lines, that altruistic message will definitely help. That will definitely get attention of the right people and the types of people that you'll ultimately, I think, want to end up working with, and also help you build up your portfolio and your resume and becoming this trusted source of knowledge. And like I said before, pairing what you know intrinsically as just being someone who uses social media with things that you've learned in school. So maybe it's a something that you've learned in cognitive science or behaviorism. And if you can tie those two together in some type of way and make a presentation, I think the strongest selling point or the strongest thing that I like to teach interns that I work with is valuing the social and the media, and they're two different beasts. So the social really being analytic and how you're conversing with people and listening just as much as you're speaking, and then there's the media part, and that's more the fun and creative and pairing the two. So seeking out things like YouTube videos or ways that you can learn about things that you might not necessarily learn in school, and pairing that with the things that you do learn in school, and then seeking those opportunities where you can bring it to life, I think would be my piece of advice on that.
That's an awesome piece of advice. Learning doesn't stop at school. It's you can do it all the time, anywhere with pretty much anything nowadays with YouTube and a whole internet.
I
It's
think
great.
school really just kind of teaches us how to learn, and then we can implement that in whatever way that we want to as the world keeps.
Yeah. So we have a question in the chat from Justine. She asks, "Hi Lauren, if you were to start a business account in today's climate, pandemic, etc., for say Instagram, how would you introduce your page? What would your first post slash few posts look like? And how would you promote your page to reach as many people as possible in, for example, the Lower Mainland?"
Okay. Well, it all depends on what the business is. And this might sound really cliche, because this is, I think, the advice that everyone would give in building an account or building a community, is that you really need to find your niche. And it has to be as clearly defined as possible. So you have to think about talking to one person and then bringing it broader in pet care. Okay, so think about one specific pet owner, what this pet owner is like, what they want to hear about, what they want to learn about, what they want to know about. Read blogs about what other pet care places are doing and what's getting the most traffic, and speak specifically to that one person, because that's going to be your audience. So for me specifically, my audience, I'm essentially talking to myself 10 years ago. So someone who's studying psychology, who's interested in it, who doesn't necessarily want to just go into clinical work. I speak specifically to that audience, and that's how that audience grows. I don't spend so much time trying to do tricks and tips and all of this. I just try and deliver the most amount of value to that niche. And that's how I think you can reach as many people as possible. What my first kind of posts would look like, I would give an introduction to who I am, why I'm here, what my business is, and really drive that point home. Let people know not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it. There might be plenty of pet care places out there, what makes yours different? What makes you, what lights your fire in doing this? What sets you apart from the rest? And communicate that in fun and exciting ways. And there's power in storytelling. So doing something in a way where you're not just putting information out there, you're having people follow along in your journey. There's also power in humor. If there's ways that you can make people laugh or smile, then you can connect with them in a different way that will most likely keep them coming back.
That's an awesome answer. Guys, you guys are getting free consulting right now. This normally you'd be charged quite a bit for this. Okay, so we've got one more question. That's the dog we've been hearing this whole time. He's so cute. Oh my God, what a cutie. Oh gosh. Okay, what elements of your job are in the field of psychology, and what elements are in the field of business? And what is it like working, and what is working in the industry side of psychology like?
Good question.
And also, what's his name?
It depends on, this is Napoleon, I call him. He's named after my favorite pastry. A lot of people think he's named after Napoleon Dynamite because he's curly.
I see. I can see it.
So the elements of my job that are in psychology, so definitely as far as community development, that social aspect of it and learning how to connect with a target audience, as well as the analytic side of measuring what's working and what doesn't work. That really is where that science side comes in and where that social psychology component comes in. The elements that are in the field of business, I've been with my company since year level. So I'm getting more and more involved on the business side of things to kind of learn how things work and learn the ropes of it, which is helpful just as a whole to kind of understand business at a glance, because that's really never been my thing. What does working in the industry side of psychology look like? I think working on the industry side of anything, the scariest thing for me, in my opinion, or the thing that I'm most hesitant or that was hardest for me to do was the money side of business, knowing your worth in what to charge when you're freelancing and really believing that you're worth that much. Again, where that imposter syndrome kind of comes from. Something that's helped me with this tremendously has been my job as a personal trainer. It's a very kind of cut and dry business transaction where people hire personal trainers. And I worked in group fitness for so long because I wanted to stay away from the business side of it. In group fitness, you kind of just go and give a good class. And if people sign up, they sign up. And if they don't, they don't. But you're just getting paid by the class. But personal training is different because it's just as much of a sales job as it is a physical personal training job. So that's really helped me with the business side and learning business on a very preliminary level, and then being able to apply that to my community development world, to my psychology world, ultimately to growing Instagram and growing social networks as a whole is not being afraid to know what you're worth and what to charge for things. And to, again, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. So knowing what's out there and knowing what other people are getting paid, knowing what kind of baseline salaries are, and not being afraid to speak up and ask for more if you feel like that's what you deserve, because most likely you do deserve it.
That's right. Self-worth, self-respect. I always end up wanting to do things for free because I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm worth like minimum wage, even if it's a job and it's in my contract.
Imposter syndrome is really a challenge, and I didn't even realize what it was for so long until you see Instagram posts about it. And I'm scrolling through a carousel. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me. I feel that. I know what that feels like. So it all comes back to that self-worth and that value, and really evaluating at the end of the day the things that you bring to the table and knowing that you're unique and your skills are valuable.
Really good points to make. So I've got another question. Is a science degree in psychology needed to apply for a neuroscience graduate degree?
Good question. I'm not sure. I guess that would vary based off of the program and the school. I would I would guess that maybe a degree in biology or cognitive behavioral science. There's so many different paths now, and there's so many different majors and specializations that different schools offer. So I think this would be kind of a case by case response. But I would look more into the specific program that you're applying for and seeing what's needed to apply.
Very cool. Yeah, I think this might depend on the institution. Okay, so we've reached the the end of the questions that people have submitted. I have a couple questions of my own just to fill the last bit of time. But if you guys have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat or put your hand up. You'll have priority over me. That's okay. I don't have to ask my questions. I don't mind. But seeing that there's nobody putting a question just yet, I have a question that's been sort of on my mind. What are, in the context of a pandemic specifically, when we're so reliant on social media for our social connections, for work, for fulfilling our social needs, what are some negative effects of social media on our mental health?
I definitely think a positive and a negative could be loneliness and feeling like it's such a wonderful thing that you could be connected to so many people, but then you could also feel like you're so reliant on this technological tool. So I think loneliness is definitely a double-edged sword. Um, I think it could also be really frustrating in the context of a pandemic of just say social media. I know for myself that I've really been trying to do my best in social distancing and limiting the things that I'm doing and the people that I'm seeing and really trying to do things for the greater good. And then you see people that might have been your acquaintances, they might not be your close friends, but this circle that you think that you have that are doing things that you might not necessarily agree with. And that's something that has been frustrating with social media is that you don't want to see these people out there partying and pretending like everything's fine. And it makes you kind of think differently about these people that you've had in your circle and really makes you reevaluate the context of different relationships that you think that you have and thinking, okay, when things go back to normal, there is no such thing. We're going into a whole new world. Each day is a different day, let alone each pandemic day is a different day. So I think seeing the things that people choose to put out in the world, and when you become more mindful of the things that you're putting out there and the things that you say, and you see other people putting things out there and you're just like, why the heck would they do that, or what are they thinking?
Yeah.
Definitely something that feels kind of frustrating and definitely has felt isolating.
Okay, Shurin has a question. Shurin, you can go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I've been meaning to ask this as well. Where right now, I feel like social media, everyone is kind of moving away from the fact that everything is like fake. That's why people compare themselves. And I feel like people are generally starting to understand that and move towards authentic. But unfortunately, I feel like a lot of influencers and people made the authenticity not authentic by trying to be authentic, if that makes sense. They try to appear to be authentic in a way that's still not as authentic because they know that's popular. So I just wanted to ask, what's your definition of authentic, and how do you remain like actually or genuinely authentic in your space that you've created? Thank you.
Such a great question. And that's such a good point on like unauthentic authenticity. Like what is it anymore? The way that I kind of see it is like I like to show up on my social media the same way that I would show up on FaceTime with my mom or my sister, or the same way that I would kind of talk to my best friend, and really just putting myself out there in that way. And again, feeling confident in yourself. I've really never been one to wear a lot of makeup or to like, that's just never really been my thing anyway. So I feel like even if people who were to know me in real life were to see my social media and I were to be presenting myself in that way, it's like, who is that? One of the nicest compliments I think I get is when I meet people who may have just known me from social media and they're like, oh, you're exactly who I thought you were going to be. And I'm like, oh, that's so nice. So I feel like just genuinely like liking the person that you are. And that goes back to that self-awareness and that mindfulness and that time spent within, which we're really kind of forced to do in today's society with everything that's going on. That's how you show up as your authentic self, when you really know what that is. Some people just genuinely don't know what it is to be authentic, and that's unfortunate. And it really is modeled by so many different influencers out there who are showing their versions of authenticity. So again, I'm happy to kind of be the one out there to show my authentic voice. And I think just as people are getting a little bit more keen to it, we're also following the people that we admire, and we're curating our feeds in a way that we want to see the things that inspire us. And I think that although we can't change the behaviors of others, we can make our social media climates and our circles a place that we want to be, and a place that we're not like frustrated. So I always say follow fountains, not drains. You want to follow the types of accounts where you're feeling inspired and you're feeling abundant, rather than you're feeling drained, or you see them and you're like, do I look like that? Is that what my eyebrows look like? You don't want to fall into that circle of feeling like you're comparing yourself. And I feel like once you kind of feel that twinge of that, then that's when authenticity becomes a part of the conversation.
Awesome question, Sharon. That was a great question and a great answer and a great way to end off the event. That's our time for today. I'd like to give a huge thank you to Dr. Serpico for taking the time to provide us with a wonderful presentation and the opportunity to have our questions answered. And I would also like to thank each and every one of you for showing up, asking questions, and having a good time. So thank you all for making this event possible. And also thank you to Napoleon as well. We can't forget our little barky friend for today. So the Expert Talk series is a bi-weekly event, so stay tuned for more information about all the exciting professionals we have lined up for you. Our next event will be on February the 5th, where we'll be inviting clinical psychologist Dr. Michael Gordon, who will be doing a talk titled A Transpersonal Psychology Approach to Trauma and Conflict. Very serious, very interesting. Stay tuned for more information on our social media channels, which you can see right here. Thank you all for coming. Thank you again, Dr. Serpico, for the amazing presentation, and have a great day, guys.
My